Hello, and welcome to another episode of Education Matters. I'm your host, Dr. Harry Jackson. Tonight we have two special guests, Mrs. Shelly Arnoldi from Moms for Liberty, the Fairfax County chapter, as well as Stephanie Lundquist-Arora from Independent Women's Network, also the head of that chapter within Fairfax County. Welcome, both of you. Welcome to Education Matters.
Thanks for having us, Harry. Thank you.
Great. All right, Shelly, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your background, your bio, your origin story, and why did you just decide to start Moms for Liberty, a chapter here in Fairfax County?
I am a mother of 4 teens. I have 2 daughters and 2 stepsons. I was formerly a federal employee and engineer for 27 years working for the government. My background, I have a degree in electrical and computer engineering and a master's in environmental engineering, and I'm a licensed engineer in Virginia. In 2020, when the pandemic hit and they shut down the schools and we were all together, I started to recognize things about my children that I hadn't recognized before. Prior to that, I really just trusted the school system and assumed they were doing what they should be doing. And frankly, I gave too much leeway. I moved here in 2010, assuming that Fairfax County had the greatest school system and earned the reputation that it had. And when I recognized what happened in 2020, I felt the need to step in and do something. So I searched for a group or chapter that I could join. I couldn't really find one that was doing the exact same things as Moms for Liberty. So I decided to step in and start the chapter.
Oh, great. All right, Stephanie, good evening. So this is your first, I think the first time you've been on Education Matters. You are a co-host on the shadow board. But for those of us that are seeing this for the first time, give us your bio, your background, origin story, and why did you start the chapter in Fairfax County for Independent Women's Network?
Yes, Harry, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on Education Matters. Love the show. I became really active like Shelly during the pandemic. I couldn't believe that schools were closed. I couldn't believe that $18,500 of tax money was going to each public school per student, given that the schools were closed. So I pulled my kids out and I was homeschooling them during that time. And that took up a lot of my time. But then I re-enrolled them when the schools actually decided to do their job and open the doors again. And then I was still not happy with a lot of things that were happening in the schools as I became increasingly aware, much like Shelly's story. I think the pandemic kind of woke all parents up, especially in Fairfax County. So then the masking thing happened. I was upset about that. I thought, and I think it's panning out now, COVID rates are still high. No one's really masking because it's then shown ineffective. My kids were suspended a whole bunch of times for choosing not to wear masks after Executive Order 2 was passed. I sued the schools. So I became really active and vocal against a lot of the school board's initiatives during that time. And during that time, I met some wonderful ladies from the Independent Women's Forum, which is the kind of the policy arm of Independent Women's Network. The network is more the advocacy arm of that. And I really enjoy the company of these women. I agree with them on a whole lot of things, and I decided to start a chapter in Fairfax County. If you're unfamiliar with the Independent Women's Network, it's iwnetwork.com, and you can look and see a lot of things that we're up to. But the Fairfax chapter in particular focuses on what's going on with school boards. We basically just want to improve the education for children and push out all of the politics in schools, all the things that aren't math, reading, writing, just the 3 hours reading, writing, arithmetic. And so that's really what our chapter focuses on. And we participate in some of the other initiatives with IWN. They are really for keeping women's sports female and supporting Title IX. Riley Gaines, you may know, the Division I swimmer. She's a spokesperson for IWN. And also, in order to, competition is the greatest motivator kind of thing, and to give families more choices, IWN does a lot of work throughout the country in promoting school choice, so educational savings accounts, and that kind of thing too. So so that's not necessarily the focus of the chapter, but definitely I support those initiatives as well. Harry, you said something, back to keeping women's sports female. You said something today that I had never heard before, and I thought it was so compelling. And I think you should talk about the speed at which we throw lacrosse balls. The three of us had testified at the commission discussing Governor Youngkin's model policies. And Harry just made such an excellent point today. And I didn't know this fact, but I thought it was really compelling about why it would be dangerous to have a biological male in women's lacrosse.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. So I was going to do a segue into like what brought us here, but for those of you that are watching, today was actually video. It was testimony for those that wanted to appear before the Virginia Department of Education regarding Governor Glenn Youngkin's proposed changes with transgender policy. Now, for those of you that may not be aware, I'm a lacrosse referee. I've been a referee within Fairfax County for the past 18 years. I referee levels from youth lacrosse through high school, JV, varsity, high school, collegiate, as well as professional. But not just lacrosse, I also do football and basketball. So I'm very familiar with some of the policies within the Virginia High School VHSL, NFHS, and I've also published some material on this. But today, what I had mentioned before was the inherent danger when you start having biological males compete in women's sports, particularly with lacrosse, where the average shot speed for a women's shot, where they do not wear helmets, is 45 miles an hour. And they actually have rules where you're not allowed to actually shoot the ball into a crowded area by the goal. That is a penalty. In boys lacrosse, that does not exist, but they're wearing helmets, but their average shot speed is 85 miles an hour. However, in both sports, that ball is Indian rubber, and it can crack your skull if you get hit with a ball at 85 miles an hour. There's a colleague of mine, a huge, big individual, 6'4", 250 pounds, former Marine, and he got hit with an errant shot, and it knocked him out cold. And that was just from a child that was literally a child, not a grown man, but that did hit him. It caught him in the right area, and it knocked him unconscious. But I think that parents need to realize the inherent danger when you start bringing those two biological sexes together, competing at that level at high school. It's going to be impossible to officiate those games safely. The same issue is going to exist in volleyball, where the women's net is 6 inches lower than the male's net, where it's dangerous even for biological men to compete with that lower net, because you can actually spike the ball with concussive force. We can create concussions. You can break bones. And then there's also soccer, which is also a contact sport. So not to scare and to shock parents of what's going to happen, but that literally could happen. And I don't know how, as an official, you can officiate a game safely and not get sued to ensure, because that's one thing as a sports official, we are supposed to officiate a competition safely where individuals do not get injured. And the Northam proposal, the Fairfax County proposal, is making that difficult to do. All right, but that's the scary part, but thank you for bringing that up, Stephanie. So let's go into like some of the areas, some of the big issues that have caught national attention. Let's talk about things that started that caught our attention as parents. Let's go into the books. What are some of the top issues? Shelly, start with you. What were some of the books that brought us into the issue? And also, for those of us that think that we're not far right, we're certainly not progressive. We're reasonable parents, but like, what are some of the books and what is some of the content that they contained that parents, for good reason, should find objectionable?
Well, first I do want to point out that Moms for Liberty's primary mission is to ensure that the parents have fundamental rights over what their kids learn. So it's about parents' rights. It's not so much about controlling everything. As far as the books that brought to my attention, actually that was before I even started Moms for Liberty. There were two books that were controversial, Genderqueer and Lawn Boy. And I saw some graphics in it. I saw the words in it. I thought there's really no reason to have these books. I'm not a book banner. I am not a right-wing anything. But in my opinion, there are better books that could be in the library. So when Moms for Liberty is painted as some kind of crazy restrictive right-wing Bible thumping, whatever it is. The fact is they just want appropriate materials for appropriate ages to be taught in school. And
to your point, Shelly, you make a great point here, because like it's not just like some far right conspiracy issue. I mean, they're actually, and we'll go into this as to why this is a major issue, because you have political lobbying groups, 501c4s, that actually have a presence within our school system. Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, the TJ Alumni Action Group. You have another political action group that has favor within our current school board, FCPS Pride, that are able to push content. Now, this is not 501c3s, which are simply nonprofits that advocate for positions. These are actually political activist arms that are actually promoting some of this material. And there's also a mode of thought. And for those of you that are interested in my background, take a look at my handle, Harry J for Justice. You will see on that Twitter handle back from 2020, 2021, a lot of these activists that will engage with us, that will argue with us, that have this belief and this thought that children do not belong to parents, that children belong to society, that children belong to schools, that the schools know what's best for the children and not the parents. And I think that this, since we're all of us as parents, like we moved to Fairfax for a reason. And I think that the panel agrees with me. And I think a lot of parents that are watching this will agree with me. We did not move to Fairfax. We moved to Fairfax for one particular reason. And it was because of the reputation of the school system. It was not due to the weather. It's not because we have a pleasant four seasons. It's not because we love driving in traffic or getting into it with each other. And, as on a day-to-day basis, we did this because we want to provide the best for our children. And now you have this political action group that is somehow not understanding that they're a part of an ecosystem, that they start messing with the schools that really are messing with the problem, because that impacts our property values, that impacts the entire purpose as to why we're even here. So I'm sorry, Shelly, I interrupted you, but I wanted to give that framing as to what we're seeing happening in Fairfax County.
Yeah, well, I do want to point out that Moms for Liberty is also a 501c4. Moms for Liberty National, that's how it's set up. The Fairfax chapter is a small part of it. We are a grassroots effort here, and we pay to the national. We are not funded by anybody. I mean, we've started, actually, we're in the negative. We're not, this is not about money. This is strictly about parents and parent rights. So when you want to talk about the type of activism, and you can go down to the roots of who started it, to moms who were on school boards who were fed up, to moms who understood the process and how to help parents, educate and share information. It really is about sharing information. And my real goal is to get 12 solid parent community members in those school board positions, because what we have right now is truthfully a danger to our children. So, and hopefully we'll be able to not, I'm happy just to raise awareness. It's not a financial thing for me, but whatever we have to do to help get 12 new people in that will fight for parents' rights, that's my goal.
Okay. Great. Stephanie, we've got quite a bit of a comment there regarding the involvement of some of the political actors. And Moms for Liberty is a 501c4, but their development really occurred after we saw some of the influence. What have you observed lately with some of these groups, and is there an issue dealing with involvement of politics in education, and should we get rid of it?
It's just incredible, Harry. We were there at the school board meeting on Thursday, and right now in Fairfax County, they're talking about changing our family life education curriculum, which, if you're not familiar, we call it FLE, but it's basically the sex ed. And there's some committees involved and some personal. You've mentioned a couple of the groups that are involved in this. And they really, they take seats on these advisory committees, and they propose the most preposterous changes. So I'll give you examples. They want to start in fourth grade combining the genders, the sexes, for FLE education, for sex ed. So, I mean, you're going to be talking in fourth grade about Yeah, little girls are going to be learning about their menstrual cycles in front of little boys, and little boys are going to be learning about nocturnal emissions, more colloquially known as wet dreams, in front of little girls, and just like learning about intercourse in front of each other, things that in most cases, even as adults, we don't necessarily want to discuss in mixed company. And you wonder who in the world would propose these insane changes. And there are certain groups of people who are really pushing this, and on their websites, FCPS Pride has its foothold in the board. So it's strange, that kind of like inappropriate relationship between these groups and the incumbents. And with regard to what Shelly said, I think, yes, I would like to see just absolutely 12 fresh school board members. And I also think, I can't even imagine that the Democratic Party should even endorse the incumbents. Like, I mean, if you look at their records and what they've done over the last 4 years, they were all 12 of them were endorsed by the Democratic Party. And quite frankly, that's an embarrassment to the Democratic Party. And yes, they have a more powerful position in Fairfax County. But if I were to run against any of them and they ran any of their incumbents, I think your prevailing argument could just be, I'm not these people. And they kept our schools closed for a year and a half. And look at the learning loss. Just look at these grades and look at how little they talk about education. So it's interesting because there should be just, even though supposedly school board races aren't supposed to be partisan, there should just be a whole new slate of candidates. The Democrats should say, these guys didn't work out. We need to endorse someone else. And definitely, hopefully both sides just find people that they're very comfortable endorsing, and it's just not any of the incumbents, or the Democrats should just be embarrassed for themselves, I think.
I would agree with you. If they don't endorse, if there's not a new slate of candidates, we see incumbents, that this is basically that parents should be concerned. So, Shelly, you were also there. Let's talk about the group that's behind some of the changes in the FLA curriculum. And if necessary, I realize that both of you are still in mom mode. I'll do the dad translator for those dads out there that are completely clueless as to what is coming down the pipe. So, I mean, I know that they're not going to go as but okay. So what did we hear at that last school board meeting, and what is this group proposing in this FLE curriculum? Go ahead. Yeah.
First, you should know that this has been long in coming since 2013, or before, the family FLE, FLECAC, whatever the group is called, Family Life Group. And in 2015 was really when they started this push. I was sleeping. I wasn't paying attention. Most of us knew nothing about it. You can go back to it. One of the moms that was with me today was on a committee that she got kicked off because she was opposed to them changing the term from, I think it was biological sex to, they started changing these terms in 15. Mm-hmm. When people objected, they kicked them off the committees. And that's how it's gone. And no one's paid attention. Apparently, there was some very big parental pushback. They lost. All those people were deflated and went away. I wasn't present. I wish I was. But, so they have been starting since 15 to go down this road, gender affirmation, changing biological sex to sex assigned at birth. That was the very first thing they did. Mm-hmm. And people warned, don't do it. That happened in 15. Now we have sex assigned at birth. Now they're doing away with boys and girls, and they're saying assigned males and assigned females. Stephanie mentioned that the things that they're teaching kids at certain grades is completely inappropriate. 11-year-olds are learning about sexually transmitted diseases. And these are children that still believe in the tooth fairy, and they're learning about things that are completely inappropriate, and parents have no input.
Well, that's just 10 and 11. What do they want to teach 8 and 9-year-olds?
So, but
what do they want to teach?
The thing for me is the secrecy. Right now, under the student rights and responsibilities, if a child comes in and says, I'm confused at any age, it doesn't matter, 10, 12, I'm confused, I think I might be the opposite sex, the school is required to set up a team of counselors for them to help them through the transition process, the gender affirmation process. They are legally required to do it. And if the child says, I don't want my parents to know, the teacher is required to keep a secret from the parents. So they can go through an entire year of counseling, gender transitions. They can change their names on a whim. They can use opposite bathrooms, and parents have no idea it's happening. And I have a friend that this it was, it's an anecdotal story from a friend of mine who said that this woman's daughter she's a, it happens more to theater children, but, so we're 3/4 of the year in, she went to a show and she hears everybody referring to her daughter as a different name that she hadn't recognized. And come to find out, 3/4 of the year, this girl was transitioning to a boy without her parents' knowledge. And she was furious, of course. And, as a parent, I would be horrified. We all love our children and we want to help them. And the idea that a school would intentionally keep a secret like that is so incredible. And frankly, I have there are two children that are, in my circles of my children's friends that have transitioned, and they're now boys. They were born girls, and they've had their breasts removed, and my children believe it's normal. And I'm not allowed, I don't know how to talk about it. It's just put me in this awkward spot where it's really put a strain on my relationship. And that's really a lot of the energy of what I'm doing right now. I can't believe this is happening. I thank God it's not them, but.
Shelly, you bring up such a good point, and IWN actually has done a fantastic series on the detransitioners, and that's actually because of all of this. It's not just accepting from the schools now; it's suggestive. So it's not just like, oh, are you gender fluid or are you transgender? It's like, maybe you are. Let's give you another survey. Do you have short hair because you actually believe you're a boy? So it's suggestive. So there's there's suggestive element to it. So then we find that like a lot of the detransitioners have said after the fact, after they get the double mastectomy, which they call top surgery because it sounds more innocuous, in this gender affirming healthcare industry that's making so much money. But anyways, like they say that they got caught in an echo chamber and they regret their decisions, that they were just confused at that time. And they had a circle of people kind of pushing them to do this. But anyways, it's a very, very good documentary that IWN does, and it's really worth checking in. But you're so right. It's such a huge problem with the school. It's not just a accepting anti-bullying environment. It's suggestive, and that's very dangerous.
And you're to your point, you mentioned before, like in Europe, they're noticing a trend. It's not really being transgender; it's trending. Was particularly with girls, with young women, where they're going into this phase, they're coming out of it later and detransitioning later, and they're finding it where Europe is moving away from gender affirming care, which is permanent, by the way, when they're pushing puberty blockers, which causes permanent damage to your child, which they want to give to your child without your knowledge or consent. That permanently harms them, and their gender affirming care, such as the vasectomies, which is not reversible. But this is like Europe is realizing this was a mistake, and they're moving away from. And they're ahead of us on the curve. We have not yet caught up here in Fairfax. You were talking about this, and I know I was translating as a dad, like some of the material that they have in the FLE, and I know that I have two moms here. They're talking in their mommy voice, like that G-rated thing. Like, but for dads that are out there, this is how bad it is. I mean, Shelly, you mentioned like 11th grade, like, oh, well, they want to talk about kids about STDs. Well, you have kids that in some rare cases might be active, and some people are like, oh, you're going overboard. Okay, well, let's go there, parents. 8 and 9 year olds, like we literally at this last school board meeting, they want to teach 8 and 9 year olds how to masturbate. 8 and 9. And
they're citing organizations who want to.
They're citing organizations that are
in the
pushing
advisory
that.
Committee. Yes.
They're pushing that. And what else does this group want to push for 11-year-olds? I mean, Shelly, you mentioned STDs. Well, they take it that step further. For the dads that are out there, for those of you that are watching this and you're at the bar, you're not going to believe this. They want to push anal sex for 6th graders. Okay? Literally, are you going to start teaching kids how they have to have an enema if they're going to start going into this process? What diet they have to eat? Or what the damages, what can cause tearing if they're going to start doing this? Not to be too graphic, but these are the actors that are pushing this type of material to this level to our children. And this is why you're having a group of parents, a diverse group of parents coming together that are fighting against this. I'm sorry. Thoughts? All right, Shelly, I saw you getting uncomfortable there.
Well, honestly, they're starting to confuse children at the age of 5. They're starting to read them books to say, am I a boy or am I a girl? That when you're born, the doctor decides, but he might be wrong. I mean, they're telling these children all these things to confuse them before they even know what sex is. And the point is, parents should have a choice to opt in, not opt out, if they want their children to be taught about sex. And they're trying to say everyone needs to learn about sex, sexuality, gender fluidity, and all these concepts that, frankly, are Stephanie mentioned the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. I don't want anybody teaching sexuality. My kids are very kind, open-minded people, and they ask questions and we answer them. I don't need somebody teaching them or confusing them. And the point is, they're not giving us any choice on what they're teaching. They're just confusing children. They're creating these problems, and the end result, children are getting hurt, permanently damaged, and they think they're saving them from suicide, but they're ruining children's lives. They're sterilizing teenagers and ruining their lives. And so at the end of the day, anyone under 18 is a child. And if they're pushing anything that's going to have a permanent effect on their bodies, their parents have to be 100% involved. And frankly, it shouldn't be pushed at all. Not my choice, but the idea that they want to start it without parents' involvement is crazy to me. So I'm all about parents' rights, parents' knowledge. These children that I know that have done it, their parents did it. With consultation with their doctors, which I don't agree with, but that's their choice. But nobody gets to put them on the road without the parents' involvement.
Well, let's talk about the emotional manipulation. Oh, Stephanie, I was going right to you. Let's talk about, I know you're ready for this one. Let's talk about some of the emotional manipulation that occurs. And go ahead, Stephanie, I'll let you comment on that one. Go ahead.
Well, I was actually going to talk about the parents' rights aspect, because I just thought I was going to fall out of my chair when the ACLU was talking. And the ACLU is an organization that I used to, I was younger, and I guess I used to believe that they supported liberty, right? Like the American Civil Liberties Union, you think that they support liberty, but they don't. They were actually on the side of prolonged masking. They wanted everybody to mask for longer. That's what they really surprised me on that one. But the representative from the ACLU got up in front of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, I think it was called. That was the committee today at the state level. But anyways, she got up and she was pushing Northam's model policies, which said that bathroom choices should be based on gender, not biological sex, so people could choose willy-nilly which bathroom they went into, and males could participate in female sports. The school shouldn't have to tell the parents if the child wants to transition or starts identifying as a different gender. So these are the Northam policies from 2020. And that's what, if you're unfamiliar with this, that's what Youngkin was trying to change, saying that parents do have rights. And in fact, he got elected on that. So I think the majority of Virginians, by the way, believe that that's the case. So the ACLU representative got up and said, there's nowhere in here does it say anything about parental rights. It's as if like the policies that she's talking about are occurring in a vacuum. There's no such thing as the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. There's no such thing as the Virginia law saying that parents do in fact there's precedent Virginia law that came long before any kind of model policy saying that in fact parents do have rights. And she just got up there and basically said parents don't matter. So there was a delegate, Delegate Head, I think was his name. I don't know which district he's out of, but he was like, can I just ask you a question? Do parents matter? And she couldn't give an answer. I was like, oh, wait, let's take a poll. Who thinks this woman has children? And that's part of the problem, right? Because like you have all these school board members who a lot of them don't have children, and they're like, oh, parents don't matter. The schools have, know what's best for them. And you're like, I'm sorry, let's just set down our pens for a second. Like, who here has children? Oh, you don't? That's why.
It's amazing. That mode of thought.
Yes, but it's when you know children and you see them, to speak to your point, both of you, about manipulation. Oh my goodness. How easy is it to manipulate somebody who's going through an identity crisis anyways? And middle school is just full of people going through identity crises. Like, I've never met a middle schooler who wasn't going through an identity crisis. So especially, I think you see these questioning their gender identity and it starts in middle school. Like, most of the stories start in middle school when they were lonely and then they found an affirming community, or even in my son's first week of middle school, he had to fill out 3 surveys on what three surveys the first week of school. Which gender are you? And eventually he just stopped filling them out completely, all of the surveys. But because it's exhausting for kids, they're like, oh, I thought I was here to learn, but I guess I'm not. There's a federal law which says that parents are supposed to have access to and be able to preview the surveys and things that the children get if they're controversial, if they're anything to do with controversial issues. But our school board, in all of its knowledge, has decided that gender identity for parents is not a controversial issue. So they don't even tell us when our children are taking these gender identity surveys anymore. They just keep on giving them out. Like, are you sure you still feel like this? Are you still a boy? Are you still a girl? Are you sure? Are you sure? Like, maybe try something else on. You're in middle school, you're confused. Try something else on. So it's gotten really bad. And there was another Representative Rome, I think, Delegate Rome, who just was like, it's, anyways, she had a lot to say about, she was constantly interrupting Secretary Guidera, but yeah,
that was very interesting. How did that end today? I mean, I saw that that they just seemed to abruptly end the proceedings. I mean, did they vote on something? I mean, or did they just vote to say we don't want to comment on this?
I think that was probably the first vote, which lost. That's what they were. That's initially what they were going for, and then the second one was, I believe, if I understand this correctly, the second one was, do you object to? So they voted that in fact they did have a right to comment on it, and I think a lot of these things happened on party lines because it was like I think there were like 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans in both senators and delegates, and it ended up that I think in the end 5 of them voted against the model policies, and 4 of them voted for it. And as you would expect, it was along party lines. But in the end, it really doesn't make a difference because the model policies are a guide. They don't have any kind of enforcement mechanism. It was only a draft. So it's kind of like everybody was symbolically commenting because people care about the issue. But at the end of the day, the committee or the commission doesn't really have any teeth to sink into the draft of what was occurring in the first place. That doesn't actually have any enforcement mechanism on what the school boards decide to do. So, I mean, a lot of it was people sharing opinions without any kind of actual enforcement mechanism.
It's very interesting. Very interesting. So for full disclosure, I used to vote as a Democrat, but that was when that was before I became a parent, and when the Democrats decided like we're going to wage war on parents. Let's see how well the strategy works for the next election. Are they going to learn? Like, you don't get between a parent and their child. So let's talk about like some new initiatives. What's going on? What are your plans for the next coming year for your chapter? Shelly, let's start with you. What are you hoping? What are some of the initiatives you have for Moms for Liberty? How can people get in touch with you, and how can they get involved?
So our Fairfax chapter, we have momsforliberty.org, and you have to connect to the Fairfax chapter. You can also email me directly, but Moms for Liberty's got a great site, great materials. My plans are pretty clear. What I have been doing, I'm going to continue doing. I monitor what the school board does and the decisions, and I send notifications about issues and invite parents to join me at school board meetings to speak up against them. We don't have as much power as I wish we did, but all we can do is raise awareness at this point. My goal, as I said, was to raise enough awareness to get 12 interested parents to come take the seats of those board members that are there. And as Stephanie mentioned, we have enough material to use against them already, and it's just not them. Anybody that votes with children and parents and not politics, because it is not about politics. I am not aligned with a political party. I'm not part of the GOP. I'm not part of the Democratic Party. And frankly, I am going to reach out to the Democratic Party because I believe we all are parents and we're interested in the same thing. So the media has really done something terrible when it's spread these rumors and made up lies. I will say, here's a good story. At the meeting the other night with the unions, one of the teachers union board members approached me afterwards and said, I like what you said, but I don't like your organization. And I asked her why she said that. She said, well, I don't like that you burn books. And I asked her why she would say that. And she said, well, the news or an article I read. And I said, well, it's not true. I don't ban books. My group doesn't ban books. We invite parents to look at books. And if we don't like them, we like to have a say. And it's just about identifying inappropriate materials and making sure that the parents are aware and have a say in what's there. And she kind of scratched her head and said, okay. And then she mentioned something about, I think it was the transgender issue. And I explained, I have children that have been affected, and parents need to be involved and informed. And she tried to give a story about, I said that the numbers are rising. It's not incredibly normal to have this many children, to have this many girls want to be boys. It's just not statistically normal.
They're more susceptible.
It's obviously being pushed. It's a social contagion, and it's a problem. And she said, well, people just weren't comfortable before, and now they're comfortable. And I said, absolutely not. That's, and this is the kind of thing that there are books out there. Go read Abigail Schreier or watch What is a Woman, or there's lots of information that you can find. It is not normal. Our children are suffering because we're not paying attention to what is happening in our schools. So my whole thing is it's not partisan. It's not one side or the other. It's all about educate yourself. There's plenty of information out there that shows what we're doing is all to support parents' rights and children. So,
to make your point that it's nonpartisan, Moms for Liberty local chapter up in Dearborn, Michigan, mm-hmm. which was 84% Democrat, was up there supporting those parents mm-hmm. when they were protesting against inappropriate material. And this is a material that was instructing children on how to commit suicide. It was instructing mm-hmm. material, it was providing instructional material to children on where to go to have unsafe practices with adults, unsafe sexual practices with adults, and where to go to look for sex, and even go where for orgies. It goes to that level. So we're not talking about books that are on the line, people. We're talking books that go clearly over the line, and that a reasonable person, even if you don't have kids, you would think, like, how can an adult push this to children? But this is what's happening in Fairfax County. And this is why parents are coming together. This is why we're congregating, we're coalescing, and we're fighting back. Thank you, Stephanie. That was a lot. So let's talk about IWN. Let's talk about your chapter with some of the big events. How can people get involved, and what are you guys up to this next year?
Yeah, well, I plan to there's a National School Choice Week, and I'd like to do something to celebrate that. More on that to come. I really believe in these education savings accounts. West Virginia has the Hope Scholarship, where the money from the state follows the student where they will go. So obviously you have to prove and show receipts. So homeschool curriculums cost money, private school tuition costs money, but the tax money from the state follows the student and best meets the student's needs in states that do this type of thing. So I would love to see something like that happen in Virginia. I would like to support that kind of initiative, or just nationally to say, I think that's a great idea. I love hearing from other parents about what's happening in their children's schools, what issues concern them. A lot of motivation for our chapter and what kind of initiatives we take up with the school board come from different parents. And when they tell me about what's happening in their school, I pay attention. We're always looking for people to share their voices with the community in letters to the editor and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much what we have coming around the bend, and hopefully everybody has really happy holidays. I think this year is kind of like wrapping up now. Everyone's about to go on their Christmasing adventures, or in any way they celebrate. So,
you know what? I just thought of an idea for those parents that may doubt us, that watch this, or skeptical. We should actually start like a school board challenge. Contact your school board member and what influence do you have? Or speak at a school board meeting. And let's just see. I wonder how many converts we'll get. For any of those that have a doubt, a twinge, just a hinge of doubt. I'm curious. We need to encourage that. Go ahead, speak to the school board. Do it yourself.
I can't even tell you how many times I've sent just unreturned emails. I mean, just to go ahead and send them an email about something you're concerned about and see if they get back to you. I mean, Yeah, they think that they're above it. So I think they
They're
have forgotten who they represent. So
I would point out if anyone wants to do that, they can contact me and I can help them, because it took about 6 months for me to figure out how to do it. You know, you have to almost be a detective and get onto board docs and meetings and signing up, and it's complicated. And then once you do, you see the same 5 people. And that's how I met Stephanie and Harry. And, you know, now I go back and it's crazy. And out of 1 million people in Fairfax County, how there are 5 to 10 parents that go, it's unbelievable. We need more parents.
We do. But yes, we do need to share your contact information for parents that do want to know how to navigate this, because it's not easy. They hide documents. They delay videos. They'll interrupt parents as they speak. And for those of you that want to watch soap operas during the day, you need to really watch some of the school board meetings. It literally is a soap opera drama literally unfolding before your eyes. And some of these things we can't make up. And for the dads that are out there, I mean, if you listen to me, like, this is actually happening to your kids. I mean, they want to change Julie to be Johnny, and you're not going to be aware of it, and vice versa. We want to hide this type of information. They want to marginalize you as parents. We actually have school board members that act in capacities as guardian ad litem that will actively seek to marginalize, that will prey on vulnerable mothers, marginalize fathers, and then try to use child protective services to take their child away from their family. That has actually happened in Fairfax County. It's very scary. And this is because you have a lot of these activists that view that the school knows best, the child belongs to the community and not to the family. And we are parents. We shouldn't co-parent with the government. And the children are ours. And as parents, we have primacy in our child's education. And I think we all believe in that. And I think most parents believe in that. Okay. Let's wrap up here. So let's do some final thoughts. Shelly, let's start with you. Final thoughts, final message. What do you want to tell the audience and for Moms for Liberty?
So really, momsforliberty.org, you can seek Fairfax County chapter. Please reach out. We need parents to step up and show up. When we talk about the books, we don't have parents analyzing the books per grade right now. We don't know what's out there, and we need parents to help us review the curriculum. We know it's there. There are some books that people have found. There are probably many, many more that, you know, if your kid's in elementary school, we need a parent that's willing to have a look at the curriculum and see what's being taught. So please consider reaching out and helping us. And you know what? If the best case you find out that what they're reading is perfect, well, then you're more informed in your kid's school. But the chances are good you're going to find things that aren't great. And then we can point it out and fix it before it's too late. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Stephanie.
I would say if you think that this is exaggerated, that it's because sometimes people say things and you're like, it's not really that bad. You can find out information online, lots of newspaper articles about it. There was actually teacher training in Fairfax County, and there are pictures of the slides in Fairfax County Times, but you can just look up Fairfax teacher training in Fairfax Times. But the teachers and staff of all schools in late spring, summer 2022 were actually given a training session, and they had to take a quiz on this. So from the school board, and this kind of stuff comes from the school board level, they were actually told, and then in order to pass the training, had to take a quiz, which said, if Susie wants to be Johnny, you are not allowed to tell the parents. They had to. So they're training them. They're training the teachers and the administrators from top down. And there's proof on this. There's receipts. So this isn't just speculative or paranoia. So this is actually occurring in the school. We have proof. This is something which is happening. And if you're at all inclined, please do get involved with Moms for Liberty and the Independent Women's Network. Please do join us. We really do need to join hands and raise our voices in this for the sake of our children. And if you don't have children, for future citizens of the country, and just so that your taxpayer money, which is more than 50% of what you pay on property taxes, goes to a school system that you can hopefully believe in and isn't working against your interests. So if you're interested in communicating with me at all, I'm not on social media, but you can email me at slundquist-arora@gmail.com. So anyways, thanks a lot for watching.
Great. Thank you. Oh, thank you for joining us. Shelly Arnoldi, Moms for Liberty, Stephanie Lundquist-Arora, Independent Women's Network. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Well, that wraps up another episode of Education Matters. I'm your host, Harry Jackson. If you'd like to follow me, my Twitter handle is Harry J for Justice. And look for us next time on Education Matters, or you can follow us on our other program, The Shadow Board. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.